Aston Martin has rebuilt the front of its Formula One car, removed weight from the chassis and gearbox, revised the rear suspension, created a new nose, and forced the entire package through fresh crash testing before Hungary. But the most shocking part is not the upgrade itself. It is why Adrian Newey believed changes this extreme were necessary after Aston Martin scored only 1 point, suffered 10 retirements, and fell to last place in the championship. Some people are claiming this B specification could unlock 2.5 seconds, but Aston Martin has never confirmed that number. Newey only promised a large step. And what the team has officially revealed suggests this may be the first real version of the AMR26 he actually wanted. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this upgrade matters, you first have to understand how badly Aston Martin's original plan went wrong. This was supposed to be the season when everything changed. Adrian Newey had joined the project. Honda had become Aston Martin's factory power unit partner. Fernando Alonso remained one of the most experienced drivers on the grid. The new regulations had given every team a rare opportunity to reset. Aston Martin had the money. It had the facilities. It had the ambition. And it had one of the most celebrated designers in Formula One history. But instead of moving toward the front, the team fell to the very bottom. Last place in the Constructors' Championship. 1 point all season. 10 retirements. That is not a small setback. That is not one bad weekend. That is a complete collapse of the original plan. And Adrian Newey has already revealed one of the biggest reasons why. Aston Martin did not begin serious work on the 2026 car until the middle of March in 2025. The wind tunnel model did not arrive until the middle of April. By then, rival teams had already been working for months. In Formula One, that kind of delay is enormous. Every major decision affects the next one. The shape of the chassis affects cooling. Cooling affects the side pods. The side pods affect the airflow toward the rear. The rear affects how the floor performs. And the floor affects almost everything the driver feels through the corners. When the first decisions arrive late, the entire development chain becomes rushed. Imagine building a house after everyone else has already completed the foundations. You may have brilliant architects. You may have expensive materials. But you are still trying to catch up while everyone else is already adding the roof. That is the position Aston Martin created for itself. And when a Formula One car is designed under that kind of pressure, one problem usually appears first. Weight. Newey admitted the AMR26 chassis was a long way overweight. That statement alone explains why the Hungarian package is so extreme. An overweight car pays a penalty everywhere. It accelerates more slowly. It takes more energy to stop. It changes direction less easily. It places greater stress on the tires. And it gives the engineers less freedom to place weight where they actually want it. Think of carrying a backpack filled with heavy objects that cannot be moved. You can still run. You can still turn. But every movement requires more effort. Now imagine trying to compete against cars carrying less weight, with that disadvantage following you through every braking zone and every corner. That was Aston Martin's reality. And the excess weight did not come from one simple mistake. Part of it was linked to vibration problems during the integration of Honda's new power unit. Part of it came from Aston Martin not having enough time to optimize every structure properly. When engineers are rushed, they protect reliability first. They add material. They strengthen components. They choose safety over elegance. That can keep the car intact. It can also make it heavy. And once the season begins, removing that weight is far more difficult than adding it. The problem is buried inside the structure. That is why the new package is not simply another front wing or floor update. Aston Martin has taken weight out of the chassis and gearbox. That required major work. It required new validation. And in the forward section of the chassis, it required another crash test. That is the first sign that this is not a normal upgrade. Teams do not repeat structural safety tests because they changed a tiny aerodynamic edge. They do it because something important underneath has changed. The new nose is another clue. The nose is the first major part of the car to meet the airflow. What happens there influences everything behind it. The front suspension, the floor, the side pods, the rear of the car. A new nose can change the entire aerodynamic path. Imagine pouring water into a network of channels. Change the entrance, and the flow through every later section changes with it. That is why this upgrade could become much more important than one visible part. Aston Martin is not only changing what the car looks like. It may be changing how the entire car breathes. The aerodynamic surfaces have also been substantially revised. Again, that wording matters. Not slightly adjusted. Not trimmed. Substantially revised. That suggests the team is trying to move away from the behavior of the original package. Because the first version of the AMR26 did not simply lack speed. It struggled to turn its ideas into usable performance. The car attracted attention during testing. Its nose looked aggressive. Its side pod design looked ambitious. The floor concept appeared unusual. But Formula One does not reward a car for looking advanced. It rewards performance. And Aston Martin's concepts did not produce enough of it. That is the difference between theoretical downforce and usable downforce. A car can create impressive numbers in a simulation. But if the platform moves too much, if the power unit creates vibration, or if the chassis is too heavy, those aerodynamic gains may never appear consistently on the circuit. One system interferes with another. The car stops behaving like one complete machine. That is exactly what Newey appears to be trying to fix. The revised rear suspension is another part of that effort. The front suspension remains unchanged. The rear has been adjusted. That may sound modest, but the rear suspension helps control how the car moves under braking, acceleration, and through the middle of the corner. It also helps maintain the position of the floor relative to the track. That is critical. Modern Formula One cars depend heavily on the floor to create grip. If the car moves outside the correct window, the airflow underneath can become less stable. The driver feels that as inconsistency. One corner feels predictable. The next does not. A revised rear suspension could help Aston Martin control that movement more effectively. But the source does not provide a confirmed lap time gain from this change. It does not prove the car will suddenly become competitive. And that is important, because the claimed 2.5-second improvement has never been verified. Aston Martin has not promised it. Newey has not promised it. There is no confirmed track result supporting it. What Newey actually said was more careful. He expects a large step. But he does not want to attach a number to it before the car runs. That caution may be the most honest part of the entire story. Because Formula One upgrades do not become real in the factory. They become real on the circuit. The wind tunnel can suggest progress. The simulation can predict better balance. The engineers can calculate lower weight. But the driver still has to brake, turn, and accelerate. The tires still have to respond. The new parts still have to survive. And Aston Martin has already learned what happens when theory and reality do not match. The season-opening Australian Grand Prix was described by Newey as the wake-up call. That race was effectively the team's first meaningful on-track running after a chaotic preseason. Testing in Bahrain and Barcelona had been dominated by power unit integration problems instead of proper development work. That meant Aston Martin reached the first race without the understanding a team normally builds before the season begins. The car was new. The engine partnership was new. The problems were already appearing, and the team had almost no reliable foundation. That is why the B specification package feels less like an upgrade and more like a restart. The original car was shaped by delay. The new package is shaped by what Aston Martin has learned from failure. A lighter structure. A new nose. Revised aerodynamic surfaces. A modified rear suspension. Fresh crash testing. Each change attacks a different weakness. But together, they point toward one deeper goal. Aston Martin wants to create the car it did not have time to create before the season began. And that is where the pressure becomes enormous. Because Hungary is not simply another opportunity to score points. It is the first major test of whether Adrian Newey's rescue plan can work. If the car improves clearly, Aston Martin can argue that the original failure came from timing, rushed development, and integration problems. If the car remains slow, the questions become far more serious. Was the concept itself wrong? Can the team integrate Honda's power unit properly? Can the organization turn Newey's ideas into working parts? Or has the project become too complicated for one upgrade to save? The answer will not come from the shape of the nose. It will not come from online claims. It will come from the first laps in Hungary. And before Aston Martin reaches that moment, the scale of its recent failure shows exactly why this upgrade has become impossible to ignore. The scale of Aston Martin's recent failure becomes impossible to ignore when you look at what happened in Belgium. Kimi Antonelli won the race for Mercedes. Charles Leclerc finished second for Ferrari. Max Verstappen completed the podium for Red Bull. Aston Martin was nowhere near that fight. Fernando Alonso finished 19th. He was 2 laps behind the winner. Lance Stroll retired after 25 laps with a problem in the AMR26. That was not simply a bad Sunday. It was a brutal reminder of where Aston Martin actually stood before the Hungarian upgrade arrived. The leading teams were fighting for victory. Aston Martin was fighting to finish. And after 1 point all season, with 10 retirements already recorded, the team had reached the point where small improvements were no longer enough. It needed evidence. Clear evidence. Something the drivers could feel. Something the stopwatch could confirm. Something the rest of the paddock could not dismiss as another promise. That is why Hungary became so important. Not because Aston Martin was expected to win immediately. Not because the car was suddenly guaranteed to gain 2.5 seconds. That number remains unverified. The real pressure came from the gap between expectation and reality. Aston Martin entered this project with Adrian Newey, a factory partnership with Honda, a new generation of regulations, a major investment in facilities, and 2 experienced drivers. Yet the result was last place. 1 point. 10 retirements. That is the kind of collapse that forces a team to ask uncomfortable questions. Was the problem mainly the car? Was it the power unit integration? Was it the rushed design process? Was it the organization around Newey? Or was it all of those things at once? That last possibility is the most dangerous. Because one weak component can be replaced. One bad aerodynamic part can be redesigned. One unreliable system can be strengthened. But when several departments fail to work together, the problem becomes much harder to isolate. A Formula One car is not a collection of independent parts. It is one connected system. The chassis must support the engine. The engine must fit the cooling system. The cooling system must fit the side pods. The side pods must guide air toward the floor and rear of the car. The suspension must keep the aerodynamic platform stable. The tires must remain inside the correct temperature range. And the driver must understand what the car will do. If one part breaks that chain, performance disappears. If several parts break it, the entire project begins to collapse. That is why Newey's description of some structural areas as not fit for purpose was so serious. It suggested Aston Martin was not simply missing a little downforce. It suggested the foundation itself had been compromised by the rushed development process. And when the foundation is wrong, every later upgrade becomes harder. Imagine trying to tune a piano with a damaged frame. You can adjust one string. Then another moves. You correct one note. A different note becomes unstable. The problem is not the tuning. The problem is what everything is attached to. That may be the deeper story behind the AMR26. The aggressive aerodynamic ideas attracted attention. The unusual nose and side pod treatment created discussion. But those ideas had to operate on a car carrying too much weight, suffering from vibration, and struggling with reliability. The concept may have had potential. The structure around it did not allow that potential to appear consistently. And this is where the B specification package becomes more than a collection of new parts. It may be Aston Martin's first attempt to make the entire car work as one system. The lighter chassis is not only about acceleration. It can also help braking. It can help direction changes. It can reduce the stress placed on the tires. The lighter gearbox is not only about reaching a lower number on the scales. It can improve where the team carries mass and how the car responds during transitions. The new nose is not only about appearance. It can redirect airflow toward the floor and the rest of the bodywork. The revised aerodynamic surfaces are not only about producing more grip. They can change how stable that grip remains when the car moves. The slightly revised rear suspension is not only a mechanical adjustment. It can help the car maintain a more predictable aerodynamic platform. Every change has a separate purpose. But the real test is whether they cooperate. That is what Aston Martin failed to achieve with the original car. And Hungary will expose the answer quickly. The Hungaroring is not a circuit where a car can hide behind straight-line speed. The track demands balance. It demands confidence. It demands a front end that responds and a rear that remains stable. The driver must link corners together with almost no interruption. One weakness follows him into the next section. A heavy car struggles to change direction. An unstable aerodynamic platform loses grip through the sequence. A nervous rear makes the driver hesitate. A weak front forces him to use more steering. Every compromise becomes visible. That makes Hungary a ruthless test for the new package. If the lighter structure works, Alonso and Stroll should feel a sharper response. If the new nose improves the airflow, the car should turn more naturally. If the revised rear suspension helps stabilize the platform, the drivers should gain confidence through the longer sequences. And if the revised surfaces produce usable downforce, the lap time should improve without making the tires impossible to control. But there is a trap inside that expectation. A large upgrade can initially create confusion. The team has spent months learning the old car. Its ride heights, its wing levels, its tire behavior, its balance changes with fuel. Then the B specification arrives and alters several areas at once. The old setup knowledge may no longer apply in the same way. A ride height that worked before may no longer be correct. A suspension setting that protected the rear may now limit the front. A wing level that balanced the old nose may not suit the new airflow.